Sixth graders, happy, well, Friday, kind of, end of the work week for us here. We have a 4-day weekend coming up, and take a second to just correct this assignment. Volume of rectangular prisms 2. There was no instructional video on this one to start. Just kind of gave this review at the top. The volume of any prism is going to be the area of that figure's base. So it could be a triangular prism, so it would be the area of the triangular base, times the height of the prism, which would be the distance between the two congruent and parallel bases. Or if you had like a hexagon base or a pentagon base or an octagon base, what you just find the area of that base, or sometimes they would just give you that base area, multiply it by the height of the prism, and you can calculate the volume of that prism. But it's a rectangular prism we're dealing with here in sixth grade, so we know the base is a rectangle, and we know the formula for the area of a base is length times width. So when we put those pieces together, we know that the formula for the volume of a rectangular prism is going to be volume equals the length of the prism times the width of the prism. That's the length and width of the base, essentially, times the height of the prism. So length times width times height. And then that basically leads to us just multiplying the three numbers they give us, right? So this is a pretty simple assignment. Use a calculator, but the thing I'm really going to kind of stress in all the answers I show here is to make sure we have those cubic units, because that's showing me that you understand what volume is. It's measuring 1 by 1 by 1 cubes. So if in this case it was meters that they gave us for the volume, we're talking about 2,700 cubic meters. So to take the same amount of space as this rectangular prism, we would need 2,700 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter cubes, or cubic meters, to take up that space. So for number 1 and number 2 here, again, it's length times width times height. We just plug in 7 times 5 times 6. Put in our calculator, 35 times 6, we get 210, that's cubic inches. Pay attention to those symbols here. Again, see how I have my work organized each time? I wrote out the formula, then just substituted in for the parts that I know. Here I know the length and the width and the height. So length 10, width 3, height 10. The 10 times 3 is 30, times 10 is 300. So it's 300 cubic meters. And maybe you substituted in like 3 for the length and 10 for the width. It really doesn't matter. Typically when we look at a rectangle, the longer of the two measurements is what we refer to as the length, and the shorter of the two is what we refer to as the width. So that's why I went 10 times 3 here. But a lot of times what you'll see is people always give that first measurement as the length, and then the second one is the width, and then the height when they're dealing with the prism. But sometimes you flip that prism around, and we don't have any examples of that on this particular sheet. But for example, here on this one from yesterday, the prism was kind of facing the other direction, right? So you can see it really doesn't matter which one you refer to as the length, which one you refer to as the width, and which one you refer to as the height. So here we have length, width, and height. So we do 12 times 8 times 4, 384 cubic feet. This was actually a perfect cube. Number 4 is not just a rectangular prism, it is a perfect cube. 9 times 9 times 9. So 9 times 9 is 81, times 9 is 729. Again, that's cubic centimeters. And the last couple here had some decimals, but again, this shouldn't slow us down at all, because we're working with probably using a calculator anyway. I kind of worked backwards on this one because I knew 6.2 times 10 was just slide that decimal, so it was 62. So then I did 62 times 8.4 just to save me a little bit of typing in the calculator here. And this one, maybe you didn't even type in the calculator. If you did 15 times 3 is 45, and then 45 times 3 is 135. Or maybe you just, again, took that shortcut and did 45 times 3 in the calculator. Or you could work backwards again. 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 15, something like that. But again, make sure you have the cubic yards here, or cubic meters, when you're labeling your answer. And then the last ones, they didn't even have a picture for us, but they just told us, here's your length, here's your width, here's your height, and it is a rectangular prism, so we can just plug those right in. The volume is length times width times height. So the volume in this case is 11 times 6 times 15, which ends up being 990 cubic feet. And for this one, which was 9, a length of 9, a width of 12, and a height of 20, it ends up being 9 times 12 times 20, which is 2,160. In this case, we're talking about cubic millimeters. So that was, again, correcting our assignment. Volume of rectangular prisms, number 2. Have a great extended weekend here.